Welcome to today's webinar, Just a Chat, the ending of the knowledge economy. For decades, the knowledge economy defined success through expertise, information, and credentials. But artificial intelligence, as we've been seeing, has disrupted the very foundation that we've been living with since almost the Middle Ages. AI doesn't just access knowledge, it's creating it, rivaling human experts across law, medicine, education, the professions, and more. The work of knowing, once our monopoly, is no longer uniquely human. What remains? Creativity. Not as an afterthought, but as a new engine of value. In the emerging economy, which we've referred to as the knowledge economy, imagination, synthesis, and reinvention are our greatest advantages. Neuroscience confirms a shift. Creativity arises from the blending of logic, left hemisphere, and imagination, right hemisphere, fueling breakthroughs across design, art, architecture, and technology. It's a merging of the two, not amplifying one over the other, but actually bringing both together. Already, UNESCO estimates that the creative economy sustains over 48 million jobs worldwide. The age of AI marks a sharp discontinuity, much like the age of reason before it. The challenge now is not just to keep up with machines, but to build a future where creativity defines human flourishing. So in my reflection of people who in the course of my life I've had conversation with about the creative economy and its emergence was Haley Simons. You've seen in the intro slide the background for Haley, so I'm not going to read it, but I will introduce Haley. In fact, the whole intent of the first half hour or so of this webinar is for me to just have a chat with Haley about things that we've talked about often in the past. So Haley, welcome.
Thanks, Perry. Hi, everyone.
So I've got a series of questions that I've shared with you. I'd like to just chat about them. And one of them is the article that went out on the weekend suggested that knowledge work is no longer a uniquely human monopoly because AI can generate text, it can generate images, and even legal arguments. In fact, we've seen some of the problems with that in the courts when a lawyer took forward an article or a position that was assisted by AI and turned out to be a lot of hallucinating references. But anyway, you have both an arts and a legal background, so let's chat about creativity becoming the new foundation of professional value when even reasoning and precedent, which is core to law, can be automated. I've always felt that relational skills are essential to sustain the professional relationship. So, what has been your experience? Are you seeing AI being used in legal professions today? What's your view?
I'm an early adapter. I would consider myself an early adapter for the AI and introducing it into this industry. And there's a reticence, of course, because of things that you said, the tendency for AI to hallucinate and create things based on what it thinks we want to hear. There is much more sophisticated AI out now for the legal profession in general, but the resistance, Perry, isn't just that it might be wrong, which is bad enough. I'm sensing that the resistance is more closely aligned to the knowledge that exists right now in law is no longer just proprietary.
Mm-hmm.
So it's traditionally held by the club. So if you belong to this guild, you could practice this trade and bestow your knowledge and your expertise for money, for exchange. We were that literally the knowledge economy. But what that does is it tends to make justice less accessible to people. So now we're at this interesting crossroads where we can open it, we can crack it wide open, and there are really forward-thinking, front-running lawyers who are taking this and running with it, helping people, using the AI to help people help themselves in situations where they need a lawyer, they need to represent themselves in court. So what we have is a divide. Some people are really wanting to focus on that most altruistic aspect of law versus the proprietary aspect and keeping it for themselves. And this is um, my domain. This is how I get paid, and anything outside of that is going to be a threat. So that's where we're sitting right now.
No, that's fascinating, Haley, because I hadn't thought about it till just now. But one of my friends, a person in the network, a contributor, um, has been before the courts for some time with Goldman Sachs, and he's been beaten up badly. There's no way he can handle the legal arguments. But now that he has a colleague called Chat, he's getting arguments that he's taking forward, and he's making headway on an issue that's been 5 years in the making and cost him a freaking fortune. But he now can represent himself, and he's finding himself successful at it. So that's your point. I mean, he's not having to engage a lawyer, although I think he still has a representative, but he takes material to the lawyer that the lawyer may not have thought of before.
Precisely. And there's one other aspect that a positive, well, positive or negative, depending on how the Law Society tends to embrace this use of AI. The court systems, as you know, throughout the country are absolutely at a standstill. In BC now, where I'm working, if you have an issue to bring for trial, you're waiting about 1.5 to 2 years for a trial date.
Mm-hmm.
We see it with criminals. It's showing up on the streets. We have the catch and release because there's no way to keep criminals where they're intended to because the court systems are clogged. So if you have people who have access to that and can use it, it's going to have the positive effect of unclogging that drain. And I think this is where we see AI in its ultimate positive form.
Well, is that called mediation? And that is, you don't even need to go to court. If you can sit down with your complainant or the person you're having your conflict with, it would seem to me with these arguments, it is more comforting for the individuals to opt for mediation instead of having to wait 1 year for the courts to get to the topic.
Could be. Alternative dispute resolution should be one of the big change agents in the industry. What your friend, I mean, there is Chat, but there are other better AI programs.
And he may be using them. I don't know. Well, I mean, he's obviously using it as an aid, not as a replacement. He still has a lawyer, but how do we navigate the tension between using AI as a support tool? Well, you've talked about the resistance. Is there a way? Well, look, this just isn't law. This is all professions where they had exclusive rights of practice because they had been certified as having unique knowledge that the client, one step above a slave in Roman times, didn't have. And now the client has access to information, may need a lawyer in order to sift it out and know how to manage themselves before a lawyer. But we're talking about it more as an aid, as a replacement. But is there the fear that this actually could be a replacement in itself?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a replacement for what? It's a replacement for money. The fear is it's going to be replacing people's salaries. I don't see it that way. My take is different. I believe AI now can carry the weight of the knowledge, and it's exceptionally freeing. It frees us to finally practice law as it was meant to be practiced, and that practice is profoundly creative and profoundly human. It's not the monopoly of a club anymore. It's a calling. It's a calling to connect people to justice and connect people to each other. So it has this potential. If we're not carrying that weight, then we can disseminate this knowledge freely, and everybody's using it together. It's exceptionally creative.
You do have in the early stages the element of trust. I mean, on both sides. In that regard, it's more likely to be an aid than to be a replacement, just because we it's still early. I mean, we're 2.5 years into this, and we've already moved into a state where we thought Watson would be replacing knowledge, but it's clearly moving quickly. And trust, one has to imagine, will become established, or there will be some serious error or regulation that says slow it down, put it aside. The legal firm has lobbied the government and now has a regulation that it's illegal to use. I don't think we're going there. I think the public at large is just too impressed, and with the take up being what it is, and the usage increasing all the time, even though it's small percentages. I can't imagine the professions being able to resist, much less willing to resist, and wanting regulations that see it and reinforce it as an aid as opposed to an alternative.
I think you nailed it. I think it is completely about trust. And remember, in this industry, I can't think of another one, just maybe there is. In this industry, all knowledge is written down. It is all recorded somewhere. So how easy is that to access? It should be the easiest thing to access. If you have a library card in the past, you can access it that way. AI just makes it more efficient and easier. So it's the distinction isn't whether it's an assistant or a replacement. It is that trust. And while AI can generate that knowledge and it can analyze and draft precedents, it cannot be the steward of privilege or confidentiality or ethical responsibility. I don't know if AI will ever be able to be ethical. So in law and medicine and in journalism, those are the non-negotiable human obligations, and this is where we come in. So no, AI can't replace us.
Yeah, I
It's
think that's a good point. I mean, it's often been made that AI lacks accountability, judgment, and ethics, and that's where the professions rooted in trust can't be fully replaced. But
right.
there's a new tool here. I mean, the printing press at one time, calculators at another time, internet, each displaced some roles by creating new ones. Lawyers now have a tool that they didn't have before that enables them to increase their speed, capacity, and reach. So in some ways, this is good news for lawyers that engage in critical thinking to ensure that the results that they get are in fact results that they wish to put before the courts and use in arbitrating a solution. Okay, so redefining education. The newsletter also emphasized that resilience and curiosity and reinvention rooted in childhood play and imagination. And I'm going beyond your relationship with the legal with law, and I'm now reaching into a discussion with you about your involvement in creativity, Creative Canada, Creative Alberta. The newsletter talked about childhood play and imagination becoming increasingly relevant and central to the skills of the future. And I'm not talking about lawyers going into court whimsical. I'm talking about human beings, whether they be lawyers or parents, recognizing the value of imagination and creativity in their own lives, much less in the lives of those who they influence. Those are relational skills. They engage human beings with one another on something other than what's in the pocketbook or what's in the brain.
It's the education is such a departure from law. Until I tell you the story about how every year in British Columbia, there's a musical theater production called the Legal Show, and I've never seen lawyers battle more fervently than to get a role in that musical theater production. So even for law, the creative aspect is there. Um, the the education is where I started my advocacy efforts. This is the start of everything. Where does creativity come from? I mean, we launched into this conversation right now, and we're I, I still wonder what do you think of what is creativity, Perry? What's your definition?
Well, I like I like the element of whimsy. I don't think creativity in the sense of coming up with something that you've never thought of before is quite adequate in defining it, because there are people like Einstein and Edison and the scientists who spend years working on something, or Beethoven or Mozart working out a piece of work. It just doesn't come. I mean, I'm sure the Beatles might say, but they sat at the piano, they worked out notes. It just didn't always happen as some inspiration. Sometimes it was a byproduct of a lot of work and a lot of preparation. So it's not something for the lazy. Creativity actually needs to be nurtured and accepted, that to be whimsical and to use imagination and jokes and humor, and toying with that part of the brain which feels soft and yet has so much to do with connectivity. I don't know, am I touching something that it's color, it's music, it's dance, but I don't mean that exclusively, because I think scientists, whether it be Feynman or Einstein or geniuses, often have music. Mathematicians are known to be creative and artistic.
Well, this is it. And I know we're talking about arts as examples here, and whimsy and play, definitely. But what we're really talking about is imagination
Oh yeah.
and the capacity to come up with ideas. I mean, where did the ideas come from? Einstein had a great imagination. Da Vinci had a great imagination. Da Vinci is the bridge with, with the imagination. And I don't think anybody could accuse Da Vinci of being necessarily soft or whimsical. And maybe it was an aspect. And the talk, when we're talking about creativity, I think we have to be really careful. If we defaulted into this silo of our bias, is it a soft skill? I don't think so. I think you take a look at everything around you. Look at all the books behind you, Perry. I mean, those aren't soft skill creations. That's creativity. Writing, whether it's a novel, nonfiction, fiction, that's creativity. Coming up with the idea for Zoom. There are so many examples of creativity that exceed what we typically think about. So, and I think this is the problem all along. So as we continue with this series, I would like to ask everybody, what's your definition of creativity now? And what's your definition of creativity after the series? Has it changed any? And I think this is important because when we're talking about anything economic, we need to have a measure. We need to have a rubric. And so we need to know what we're measuring. So creativity has an aspect of whimsy or play, but if we're thinking of it concretely, it's imagination.
Yeah. And it isn't just imagination in the arts, it's the imagination of bringing together that logic, that concrete, and that capacity to change the edges, to modify the borders, to see things with a different perspective. I don't know if this is creativity or not, but I'll share. I don't think I've shared this with you, Haley. My first publication, and I have a few in science when I was a graduate student and before, was a byproduct of some work in a laboratory. In order to do research on the brain, you typically needed electrodes, and those electrodes needed to be insulated. Now, these are very fine, almost the width of a hair, but they're solid, and you dip them into epoxy in order to coat them so they were insulated. Well, it was very delicate to drop this fine wire into an epoxy and then withdraw it in a very even manner so it didn't have little bubbles on it. It needed to be smooth. It took a long while in order to do this, and the error rate was phenomenal because you needed to withdraw it, and so we had little machines that could do the lifting, etc. Well, one day I had a creative thought. Why not put them into a bath and pull the plug? And so I made a bath of epoxy, pulled the plug, and the watered, the epoxy drained out evenly. And I thought, this is publishable. And in fact, I got my first publication. But I remember one of the reviewers saying, Creative, but my God, publishing that someone used a bathtub seemed to be a little bit of a stretch to science. On the other hand, it was a solution to a problem that nobody else had really come up with. And there's a touch of creativity. Just like a child looking at a cloud and seeing an elephant and using their imagination to see things that others didn't see or that they saw first and are showing it in communicating. Do you also see? That's what the Rorschach test is all about. So, people have talked about imagination in childhood, and the schools need to do more than simply locking the kid into a regime of what he knows or what he doesn't know. But there's often been resistance about whimsy in raising children or imagination or going to the woods as opposed to going to the museum. I, for one, disagree and spent a lot of time with my grandkids with whimsy, with imagining the fire-breathing dragon in the factory or whatever it might be. And now they're critical thinkers. They know the difference. But when they were growing up, there was something engaging, something that enabled them to see a world that existed in their minds and existed in my mind that we could talk about.
I think the whole subject of education, what we're teaching our kids, is deserving of months and months and months of webinars. This is something I've lost much sleep. I've shed many tears. And now I'm going to have an I told you so jar that I'm going to start putting coins in. And the I told you so jar will have the coin in it that said, when we teach through the arts, not necessarily teaching the arts, when we teach through the arts, there is so much scientific, measured outcome studies. I mean, it's not even an argument anymore. So when somebody wants to, I would look forward to receiving any challenging questions about how creativity should not be taught in schools. It's to our detriment and to our ultimate demise. If you do not have citizens who can think critically and know how to think, not what to think, that's where the power is.
Well, I reached out and we shared some of these points to ponder on this particular topic of the merging of arts and science and how, when they blend, they can be mutually complementary. And in the world of law, it helps legal practices when they can tell stories or narratives or metaphors or framing, which make it easier to communicate and relate to someone and one of their objectives, and being closely tied to the arts. In science, design, architecture, digital media, they all integrate technical knowledge with creativity. And when you bring the two cross-disciplinary thinkers like Da Vinci, and while he was extremely bright, and that's not the point that we're making, that you've got to be intellectually or knowledge-based bright. You don't have to have that particular adaptability to be a cross-disciplinary thinker. They're adaptable and innovative. Specialists may be vulnerable to automation. I think that's the very point. When you're a specialist in knowledge, you're the one that's vulnerable to the power of AI as a know-it-all. The UNESCO has already highlighted creativity as a top skill for future workforce. And then when we looked at examples, we looked at biodesign and creative coding and environmental law and sustainable architecture. These were the intersections where we see the economy shifting by bringing these forces together. And universities beginning to ask questions about the humanities or arts, and in fact the relevance of that for those that have been in the professional schools where knowledge is everything. And then finally, and this is when it really gets fun, and I know you and I have had these conversations before, sometimes over a glass of wine and otherwise, personal reflection. Arts embodying how we think, how we problem solve, our own consciousness and imagination. As I was napping today and I was thinking, I in my consciousness, in my imagination, I don't have visual imagination, but I have auditory. And when I read, I'm not a speed reader. It's my voice going through the book. I'm sure there are people that have visual imagery, which I don't have. I have auditory imagery. And I'd be very interesting in the course of the chat when we open this up for others to hear whether they're conscious or conscience, for that matter, is auditory, visual, or a combination of both. What about you, Haley? Do you dream in color?
um, I, after all these years, I think I should know, but the best I can say is I think so.
We'll work on it tonight,
I will. I'll take notes. Um, and you're the psychologist, you're the brain scientist, so you would know
But
much.
there isn't a lot of, when we got into behaviorism, and behaviorism was dominated psychology for so long, and has society, that the only way to know someone is to know their behavior. But the cognitive psychology has emerged to have something to offer. Even though we have difficulty understanding the substrate, when we look at how people think, what they think of, the structure of their thinking, the structure of what they reflect, the morals, the values, the ethics that govern a person's behavior have become increasingly a subject of discussion, whether it be resolving PTSD or just getting to know someone, of getting to know something other than their behavior, what they think about, what they feel, the things that attract them. These have become increasingly relevant as we move from being overwhelmed by the issues of society to being underwhelmed by the issues of being human. That's the part that really intrigues me in this series, is going from the public-private clash and spending so much time on public issues to wrestling with what it's like to be human in the world of AI.
Well, it sounds to me like everything you've just described can be summed up with one word, and that's empathy.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know my chat GPT tells me what it thinks I want to hear. I don't think it's necessarily very empathic of it. I think there are still particularly human characteristics that it can't embody, will never be able to embody. Um, that when we're starting to talk about the creative economy now, and we talk about it like it's some brand new innovation, but it's not. It's been around forever. I always wear this when I want to be reminded of that. I'll try and put it a little closer. I know you were offended by my earring, but I hope this doesn't cause any offense. It's a malacate. It's a spinning whorl from Central America, and I mean, they were found in abundance. It's not like I stole some rare archaeological art.
They're not full of parasites or anything.
I hope so. I hope not. It was used in that culture to spin fibers into thread, and this one's over 600 years old and belonged to a young girl who's weaving and would have literally fed the local economy. She would trade this. Textiles were the big economy. And that's the lineage we're standing in. We're whether we're designing code or composing music or spinning ideas, it's still this is the grounder. And the arts have always been the single domain that refuses to stay in its lane. And long before we had words like interdisciplinary or innovation, artists were already fusing what the rest of the world insists still to this day on separating. And the Renaissance didn't happen because of a committee. It happened because art, science, engineering, philosophy, math all collided in this same creative zone, the creative minds. And Da Vinci didn't have a STEM grant. He was the bridge. He was the bridge. So it's I mean, it remains, correct me if I'm wrong, it remains the only field that consistently integrates other domains. Architecture blends design and physics, and we have filmmaking with the technology and the psychology and the storytelling, and it's not an alternative to science or industry. It's the connective tissue, and it is what humanizes the data and translates this discovery. So the creativity aspect of it is what's going to keep us distinct and apart from the technology. The technology will always remain just a tool.
Well,
Back to our very first conversation, right?
that reference to humanism and to humanity and breaking it down to us as individuals, humanity being made up of the collective of all of us. I want to turn with our last question, and we've alluded to this throughout, the relevance of all this to us as individuals. In this age of reason and the magic of economies, and what happened when we brought all of these forces together, we now have a chance with AI to spend some time about who we are as individuals. And I've reflected on this myself and with others, that we spend very little time in public discussing about who we are as people. And I don't mean the ego of a Trump. I mean the authenticity of us as vulnerable and powerful at the same time, of having wishes and dreams and taking initiative. So when we refine, thanks to AI, what human dignity is, because it takes that knowledge and says, what's left is us as creative, authentic individuals. And I don't know how many people as adults, maybe as children they reflect, or maybe they need to learn how to reflect. And maybe that's one of the issues. We need children, when they say, I'm bored, to know this is an opportunity and not a threat, to say, work it out. Find your place, exercise your imagination, go study the head of a pencil, find something of interest, find out who you are. So when we look at creativity as identity, our uniqueness lies in our imagination, our play, what we do that is meaning making. And machines can process data, but they can't care. We can care about one another. That's a unique quality. That's something that helps define us, is the extent to which we care about ourselves, much less about others. So this time spent of sharing who we are with another is social, but sharing with ourselves is meditation. Once it was called prayer, and in prayer you learn to speak to yourself and to another. It's not something we talk about publicly, and yet it is a quality that I think people need to be civil in a society. Am I touching something that we've discussed in the past, Haley?
Well, absolutely. So uh, I don't know if you've shared your quotation with everyone on this call before, but you have with me, and you have several times. And Perry has this wonderful quotation that I'll try. I think I've memorized it, Perry. In time we touch, life and love will never be the same. Did I nail it?
I've shared. I mean, Jeff's heard it, and I think Tom's heard it. A number of you. I call it a mantra.
Well, it's a nice mantra, but it's also it is something that you can think about. And creativity could be that opportunity to look inward, or not. AI creates as well. We have examples now of AI creating the actress Tilly somebody. Hollywood is up in arms about that. It just created a wonderful retro 50s blues song from an Eminem standard. It has incredible creative potential as well. But it doesn't have the desire to create. It's still us inputting something into the AI machine to create it. We are still operating the tool. I don't know if there's going to be a point at which it's going to spark some desire to create. I don't think so. I would have a bet jar on the other counter for that one. But it certainly begs a series of much deeper questions than just economic benefits, doesn't it? I mean, we've now leapt from benefits in education, benefits in the economy, to benefits in not just navel gazing, but really looking for meaning. Why are we here? What's it all about?
That's a good point to bring the others in. Tom, share with us your perspectives or your questions.
As you know, for most of my career, and a lot of that was as a documentary producer and so on and so on. So it was never easy, and I've often maintained that ideas are cheap. Ideas and creative ideas are just as easily accessible to a lot of people, but it's the people that actually carry them through and carry them forward. And I keep thinking of the expression of this the British have for once you get married and start having kids in the house, and they, as Zorba called it, the whole catastrophe. You start to lose sight of being able to do anything really creative. The majority, as I'm talking about. But there are the strong-minded that carry on through, and I think the stupid, not in my case. But anyway, there's a very large group of things that can get in the way of you actually having a creative life. Being able to maintain the joy of creating something that is really enjoyed by yourself and enjoyed by other people. And it's just hard. It's just really hard, and it has a toll on your family and everything else. And you have no choice when you do go into the media. You're dependent on luck to get the job in the first place, and a lot of wits and everything. But in the end, it is so hard to define what you were saying.
Was creativity defined and valued in terms of its economic relevance?
That, if a good idea comes up and the right people get on board with you on it, it'll carry through. And cost, of course, is going to be a factor in your budget estimates and everything else. And you hope your audience projections and so on and so on. All this takes a great deal of effort and can fall to pieces on you.
If creativity is in the eyes of the beholder,
yeah,
somebody was an intermediary deciding whether or not this had relevance to a market, or was simply the idea of an individual and, cute, imaginary, whimsical, but irrelevant from an economic perspective. Somebody was an intermediary and hired because they were good at seeing an idea becoming relevant to a market. That in itself was creative.
Have any bone of artistic quality in my body. It's hard for me to appreciate certain things. But it's one of these things where I know what I like, but I don't know why I like it sometimes. And let me give you a hard example. For example, if you remember getting on the internet using Google and just being presented with a list of links and then going and picking out one of these, finding it, and making the decisions for yourself as to whether it's relevant to what you're looking for or not. And now going and getting the AI summary of what is asked for. And even more now with Chrome, for example, you can get the audio summary of what an article was about. I prefer to make my own interpretations of things, and they may be somewhat different than others. I think that probably applies for all of us. Bill has made a couple of comments on there that are truly in line with what I'm thinking here as well.
No,
But
go ahead, quote them, because I just asked Bill if I call on him. So I think they're good quotes. Go ahead.
I'll have to get back here. Um,
Well, you said, if I see farther than others, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of giants. That was Isaac Newton. Or from Picasso, good artists copy, great artists steal. That's from Picasso. Bill, thank you. If you've got any others, I mean, they really are excellent.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
how the side chat is happening here is the difference between what AI does. And we had a little side chat about it. AI simply can accumulate by pattern recognition. What would make a good song? Here's the beat, here's the blah, blah, blah. If you do that, you've got the bases that, the top 10 have formulated to make a successful song. But is that a successful song? Well, no, it doesn't necessarily. And I think that's where the creative is. I think where AI doesn't create, it imitates. And, as Jeff pointed out, that's exactly right. Good artists copy, AI copies. Great artists steal. They take that and then they make it its own. And as I said to Kyrin, I don't like rap at all, but there's no way AI would have ever invented rap as a genre of music. It would have actually led you away from such a thing, and yet that's a very dominating genre of music. So we have to, I think we infuse AI with powers that it doesn't have. We see it as remarkable, and it is absolutely remarkable, but it has no creative ability. It has insight to what is success and what is failure. But we have to take that as our guide and either break it if you're innovative, like a rapper, or follow it and try to build our own creativity into the odds that this will be successful if we do this type of thing. So anyway, it's a great chat off the side there. Thanks, Jeff, and others that have participated. It's been very enlightening myself.
Perry,
Oh,
if I can take this opportunity to further to what Bill is saying, we actually have an expert in our webinar group here, and that Matthew's here, Matthew Costello. Matthew's from New York, and I'm glad he's in on the call today because this is exactly what he can speak to. And I know Bill used the example of rap, but if we want to talk about an absolutely mind-blowingly successful example of a genre, let's talk K-pop and how K-pop has transformed an entire economy for South Korea.
Mhm.
Absolutely mind-blowingly so. So if can we ask
Matthew,
Matthew to
introduce
continue?
yourself and Kalea.
Hey, how's it going, folks? My name is
There
Matthew.
they are.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, fine.
All right, perfect. So yeah, I'm a music producer, and Kalea is a songwriter. We write music for K-pop, which is Korean pop. And yeah, more recently we've been getting into like pitching music. So it's essentially like they'll reach out to you with like a brief. So it's like certain parameters and guidelines for like what they are interested in you creating for them. And then you create around those parameters. So I'll like usually produce the music and Kalei will usually like write it. And yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay, and it just doesn't come out of air. I mean, you've obviously got some background that it gives you the tools to shape something, and that what you shape is unique or creative and fits.
hmm Yeah, so the interesting part about that is that if I was AI, I think I'd be the one to kind of just like take the parameters and just like spit out exactly what they want. But those songs never place. And when I say place, I mean like, like you get like money for the song. And essentially what they're really, really looking for is your own voice to get into it. So they give you specific guidelines, but it's never really about the guidelines. And that's the unspoken truth in the industry. And that's what you learn after doing like a couple tracks, you know, and suddenly there's no traction at all. And they're like, oh man, like we need more tracks. You know what I mean? So they want to hear your voice in it. They want to hear your take on it. They want to hear, you know, your background as a producer and everything that you have to offer for it.
So how hard is it to find yourself in that?
Well, it's difficult. Yeah, you got to be there the whole time. You know, I think you got to kind of bring yourself to a point where you can interpret, but you can also hit the parameters, obviously, you know?
It asks for your own experience, and I think it really needs disagreement, a little bit of dissonance, not necessarily literally, but it usually needs resistance. And I will say, like, I think one of our opinions on K-pop as an industry is and specifically relating to these briefs, which again are hyper specific, is that in a lot of ways it's kind of anti-creative. And I think that's something we've kind of been at odds with, is that these briefs will come in, they'll have a specific BPM, a specific register, content, they'll have references. And so sometimes we'll get these briefs and we'll actually feel like we're AI and we're the ones where they're spitting into a computer and we're the computer saying, perfect, have I got a song for you? But the one thing they can never account for and never predict is just how it resonates and how it impacts them and preferences. Because they can premeditate all they want. They can premeditate the music video around it. They can pre-plan the choreography to a song that doesn't exist. But what they can't predict is if they enjoy a song and if it moves them. And yeah, like Matthew said, I think the most success we've gotten is when there's a formula that isn't followed. And I think that speaks to the role of creativity and probably the limitations of AI. Because as again, AI is really good at people pleasing and imitation and mimicry. But no, it can't experience it. The most human component is missing with you know, AI generated music, is that the prerequisite to AI generated music is human generated music. So it needs impulse. It needs yeah, the input there is inherently human. So the output's going to be an impression of humans, but
I'm tempted to ask the following question. The KEI as a network exists to explore the clash between public and personal interests. It takes us into politics, where a government tries to come up with a policy that fits all, and then what happens at the individual level, where you're asked to be satisfied by this policy that only serves the average. But when I think of an artist, there are artists that exist to please the public, and then there must be artists that are happy as hell to just please themselves, to find space that resonates with them. How do you bridge the two, or can you? Can an artist live alone?
I think, you know what, there's a marketing strategy with artists and especially musicians, where the more niche your branding is, or the more niche your appeal is, the wider net you're actually casting. So I would say that popular artists, people that are really successful with drawing in a large audience, are usually the ones with the most specific and niche and actually like targeted aim or targeted audience, where they're not aiming for everybody. But when you actually narrow your vision or your branding or what you stand for, or yada yada yada, you in turn get a wider audience. You actually appeal to more people. Yeah.
So they're authentic to themselves, but they get discovered.
Yeah, absolutely. They get discovered, or it resonates. And I think that's the story with a lot of artists. And I think you can kind of like argue that after that point, that sets trends. Those trends for like next generations of artists tend to be trying to resemble what those generations before stood for. But in terms of what really gets people saying, yo, this is new and exciting, is when it's something that people are brave enough to, I guess.
It's interesting to listen to what you're sharing with us, because in some ways you're speaking as scientists would speak. A scientist gets engaged in an issue and develops the tools to explore that issue, and sometimes finds that breakthrough that is relevant to the public, and sometimes spends a lifetime alone with that idea. I'm going to ask Kieran. Kieran's got his hand up. Hang around. Don't go away, Matthew and Kalia. Kieran, what is you want to share with us?
Yeah, actually, in this case, Karen's a she, but it really can go either way. So, I'm a little bit curious, Matthew and Clea, and everybody, because this is part of why my question came up. I know very little about K-pop. I mean, I know it exists and I know people love it. This I know. I know there's the Demon Hunter movie thing out, so I know pieces, right? When I say like the information that artificial intelligence has available to it, so my family background is East Indian, and I oddly listen to remixed 70s songs. So from India, not from here, which is hilarious because my friend's like, you grew up here. How come you don't know all these other like genres and types of musics and musicians? And it really shows up when there's pop culture references, right? But that's just, look, so I'm one individual with a different background. There's tons of different cultures and tons of different types of music out there that the way that a machine has access to is entirely different than the way that I have access to. Now, I admit, I have tried this. I've tried to find out what like the most successful East Indian song was on the charts the day I was born. Not so easy to find out, right? But so I get that there's some limitations to the data that exists. But in theory, couldn't the machine be a lot more creative than any individuals? And I don't mean this to be disparaging. Like, I am just truly curious, just because it has access to that much more. And so because you two are actually artists, and so I love that Haley described you as experts, because to me, you are the experts today in this room. I'm super curious about what you think. And anyway, I'll stop. Thank you.
Go ahead, Matthew, Kalia.
Yeah, I think my interpretation of that is more input does not always mean better. So in the case of something like creativity, and also with what Kalei was talking about before, the quality of the connection is more important than the quantity of it. So in that way, yeah, like a machine it's gonna have nearly infinite inputs, from every style and every genre, but what it'll never have is the bias of a human experience. Yeah, did you want to add?
No, I was just going to say, I think bias is probably the most important part, because one thing that AI can't have is taste as well, or preferences. So AI can't necessarily take all those inputs and say, you know what? I really love disco. Like I'm feeling really drawn to that. And wouldn't it be cool if we took that influence and took my other favorite or my other preferences? It actually is unhealthily unbiased. And so, like Matthew said, you can maximize your inputs. It doesn't mean you're going to get more specific or more inventive output. You need to be selective, I think, with what you like and what you're drawn to. And I think, yeah, if I had all the time in the world, I would try and listen to everything as well. But I think the time and the experience and the process of deciding what I do and don't like is what would make the output unique, as opposed to my impression of it or a pastiche of it,
Okay. Bogdan.
Thank you. Two experiences from life. So I used to install virtual reality systems that were based on motion. So you would have image and motion that were synchronized. Disney had them all over the place, and so on and so on. And there were three ways of doing motion, so to speak. One way would be bang bang. You would just give extreme type of accelerations, and the public would enjoy the surprise, the fear. Then there was the mathematical model driven motion. So you would be in the movie and the acceleration would match the trajectory of the camera, correct as per physical models, physics models. And then there were very few. I met one person that had what I think we call artistic, which are, it's a way of implementing motion that it's closer to the mathematics, but it induces emotional spikes. And this is not fear. This is what Carl Gustav Jung was calling numinosity. These are messages that go below consciousness, into the unconscious, and tell a story at that level. So from a physics point of view, the artistic way was wrong. From a human experience point of view, it was much richer than anything else. Like, for example, a trivial, but the gentleman's talent was orders of magnitude higher than that. You would be on a boat and you are approaching a waterfall. This is a dramatic moment. So there will be a rumble that would be added to the motion component prior to the event that actually would project higher accelerations and so on. And that rumble, that component is what I see the art. So this is one aspect, and I'm not so definitive that AI wouldn't be able to become artistic. It's just that it's not yet there. What the AI that we use has scanned is the human experience above consciousness. That one reflects emotions and so on, but there is much more than emotions in our unconscious portfolio.
Okay.
Again, this notion is defined by Jung through the concept of numinosity, which is very common in religious experiences and so on and so on. It is an inner, below consciousness type of experience and status.
Thank you, Bogdan. We're going to move on because we're getting near the end. And Jeff has his hand up. Jeff, I'll go to Jeff Kramer and then Jeff Ulich. Go ahead, Jeff.
Hi. So I just want to toss something into the ring here that, you know, at first blush might not seem very creative at all. And that would be, you know, it's not farming and agriculture. And yet I would dare say that it has some applications. So I've been to Olds College a few times for their ag show days. And you know, they have machines now that are going out in the field. They're able to scan in real time patches of ground, determine the fertilizer requirements, the water requirements, for specific plants, determine if a plant is the desired plant or if it's a weed, and they go through and they're able to handle these things as the machine is going through the field. Now, you could say, well, this is just following a program. And I would dare say, though, by taking aggregate data, it's turning farming from being, a semi-skilled, I don't know, I think farming is a very skilled trade, but to do it properly. But it's taking it to the next level and replacing the labor that you can imagine people going around and sampling all those things yourself, how much that would cost compared to being able to automate this whole system.
You've raised a good point here. I mean, it seems to me you can be creative without necessarily doing something of economic value.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that is an important point in this discussion, to realize that an individual alone can be creative. An individual, to understand oneself, can do something of value. It doesn't always have to be of economic relevance. That's capitalism, and it's not. I'm denying it, but I think we get caught up, and our kids get caught up in believing that the only things of value are things that make an economic contribution. And you have to make a living. You've got to put milk in the fridge. Nobody's denying that. But that doesn't mean that there is not value in spending time getting to know oneself. Okay, Jeff Hewlett, your turn.
Sure, thanks, Barry, and thanks, Haley, for all your insights today. Really appreciate it. One of the comments you made that I think is really important for us, that really resonated with me, is your comment about not expecting empathy out of the AI that you're chatting with. That they are simulating empathy, and that the platforms are being built for engagement, to keep you on the platform. That's why psychophancy is kind of hardwired into those systems. But I think it's really important for everybody to understand there's no there there. There is no person care. There's no caring entity behind that algorithm. So that was one of my points that I wanted to reiterate or emphasize from what you said, Haley. And then I was thinking, as the conversation unfolded, that I read an article a long time ago that was describing some of the controversy when painters in, I don't know if it was Renaissance times or before that, there was a real controversy about a new type of paint that emerged. It was much more vibrant, and it changed the nature of what people could paint. And there was controversy about it because it was disruptive to the artists that were painting with the old style of paint. And then I thought about the impact of digital photography, and photographers were concerned about how that was going to disrupt what they, the painters were concerned with what that was going to do to disrupt their work. And now Apple has an entire industry built around what they call computational photography, and that's become embedded. It hasn't been a threat to the quality or the ability of photography to resonate with people and to touch people and cause and create emotion. And I wonder if the tool that we're talking about now is another variation on that theme. It's another tool that will be used by creative people in ways that are going to just amaze us in the coming years. And in my background, or what I remember from some of this stuff that I read in the past, was the three types of creativity were described as combinational and exploratory and transformational. And combinational is something that AI happens to be really good at. It's already helping a lot of people combine things in new ways because of that volume of information that it has. Exploratory also, in terms of drug discovery and protein folding and all this stuff, it's allowing an entire new world of options to be discovered. The transformational one is where AI is not really there yet, and it's still, that's the piece that we've been talking about, the empathy, the judgment, the critical thinking. That's where humans still have an important role to play. And I think someone said just a few minutes ago that it's not there yet. And I think maybe in 5 years, maybe in 50 years, maybe it'll never happen. But I think we'll continue to see progress on these systems, even into transformational creativity. And it's maybe a whole new category of creativity, computational creativity, like what Apple describes with their computational photography. So I think we're in for a heck of a ride, and I think it's going to be a really useful tool for anybody in the creative space, just like the new paint was, just like digital photography was, and just like countless other examples could be.
Well, that's a good point for wrap up. We're watching the arts evolve in a world of AI as we're watching knowledge and the knowledge economy evolve with AI. And we remain quite curious of whether or not there will be a bridge between the two. We can cite people like Da Vinci and others in the course of history who have become public figures and therefore well known. I'm sure there are many individuals who never became well known that were creative and maybe not quite so smart, that were creative and whose lives one would say were creative. And so to be publicly acknowledged does not have to constitute the relevance of one's life. Humanity is not necessarily popularity, even though Donald Trump might disagree. A life worth living can be creative, even though it may not be the most popular. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. Haley, thank you for stirring this conversation. I thank you, Kalia and Matthew, for joining us, and others. I'm going to call it a day.